Hello, I am Steve, and we are answering God questions. Today we'll be answering the question, what is God? This is the first and most basic question about God, and it's important for those of us who are Christians and non-Christians alike. For Christians, it's important for us to help us identify false teachings about God. For unbelievers, it is helpful because it'll help you to understand what Christians believe and to avoid straw man arguments against God. So either way, having a proper definition of the Christian God will help us to identify what is Christian and what isn't. Now, I've summarized my answer in 7 points, but I'm going to present the first 2 today. The first of those points is that God is the first cause of all things. Now, the very first verse in the Bible, Genesis 1:1, tells us that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So God is the creator of all things that have ever existed. Now, science tells us the law of cause and effect, which says that for everything that comes to exist, there is a cause that precedes it. So this could lead potentially to an infinite chain of causes extending backwards endlessly, unless there is a first cause that is uncaused. As Christians, we have an answer to this problem, and that first cause is God. Now, skeptics may sometimes object and say, well, who created God? But this betrays our understanding of God as the uncaused first cause, because the question essentially can be translated as, who created the uncreated creator of all things? And that is an absurd question. Now, there are some valid questions that arise. How can God be uncaused, for example? And also, did God exist infinitely in the past? So to answer these, I'm going to move on to point 2, which is that God is eternal. What does it mean that God is eternal? Well, I guess the best way to describe that would be to say that God is not bound by the limits of time. So time is a measure that has a starting point and then moves forward. Yet God has somehow always existed. So I think we run into the limits of our understandings as human beings of how that can be possible, because we only understand what it's like to live in time. Yet I think the alternative, if there is not an eternal realm, is something that is a logical impossibility. If you end up with an endless regress into the infinite past, there would be no starting point to move forward from. So we have to have a starting point at some point to time. And I believe that God gives us that starting point, and that He Himself must exist beyond time. Now, the Bible tells us also that God has always existed. In fact, the Hebrew name for God, Yahweh, it literally translates to I am. And likewise, Jesus stated in John chapter 8, before Abraham was, I am. At this, the Pharisees picked up stones to stone him because they knew that he was declaring himself as God. And that it was understood that God is an eternal being. Now, putting these 2 points together, we already have enough to eliminate a lot of false ideas about God, those ideas that present God as someone who became God at some point, or is only a God of a certain part of the universe, or for example, Mormonism, which teaches that God was a man who became a God. We can instantly identify these then as being outside of the realm of Christianity, because they have an insufficient idea of who God is. So anyway, that'll wrap up those 2 points. Next time we will continue answering the question, what is God? We will cover 3 more points. The first of those will be God is a life-giving spirit. The second will be God is a mind. And the third will be God is one being in 3 persons. See you next time.